All right, part two. This is part two of the sex and gender asteroids. There is video one that is attached to this. Let's move on. So in the last recording, I talked about biology and power preference and also biology preference. Now let's get into straight up masculine and femininity. I call these polarity because I don't know what else to call them. Really, these are technically gender, but these are more like gender identification. So there's gender behavior, gender preference, and gender identification. And yeah, I know, lots and lots of dimensions. But so if you think about this, we're kind of just raised by default according to standard sexual categories. Let me back up for a second, and then I'll talk about polarity. So, nope, number. Let me go here. Okay, so I'm a biological male, and that means that astrologically, I am a character who, when you throw me into an unknown situation, I go off as if I know what I'm doing. And instead of, looking at the details, looking at the information, and then deciding what to do. That's basically how the cycle of behavior works for biologically, physically, apparently trained males. And then you have the preference. So if I'm a biologically trained male in normal society, I'm trained to assert on females. And so I'm trained to be heterosexual. Oh, by the way, this was the appearance. I'm trained to assert against female appearing people. But both that and the previous one, we're talking about appearances. As far as actual behavior, there is a kind of power dynamic that I will want, and I will want my apparent looking female to behave in feminine ways. So I prefer feminine behavior. So this is the male cluster here. But this is the kind of power that is used on me independent of what my partner looks like. Now this category, this new one, polarity, is how I behave. So you can imagine that there are some people who prefer feminine behavior, but they also prefer to display feminine behavior. This is your expressive polarity, and this is what makes sexuality so complicated, because it isn't really just a matter of what you like and who you are. It's a matter of what you like and who you are and how you look and how your partners look. So I was quite surprised to find that masculinity and femininity were not really indicated by major asteroids. And that's probably because these kinds of power dynamics depend on who we're interacting with. A macho male, a mafioso, if you will, may be a lot less macho with his mother, for example. And so where then is the masculinity? It may still be there, but it's definitely graded, and it's going to change with your friends and your bosses and strangers. And so masculinity and femininity are rooted in what has been described in feminist literature as a performance gesture. It's more than just a gesture, but it's basically a gesture. It's depending on who you're with, you're going to be more forward in your psychology and how you use power on them, or less. And for that reason, gender polarity, masculinity and femininity, really it depends on these four kind of obscure asteroids that typically don't mean much in the chart. Aline, I guess. 319 Leona, 366 Vincentina, and 89 Julia. So, for example, macho male who is just like, I don't know what the information is about. I'm going to go out there into the forest and really do it. If he's a biological male, he's trained to do things this way. But whether he actually does them this way is the matter of masculinity. He may do them this way, but he may not do them by default. He may need to be pushed. And if he's pushed, he'll be what we'll call a beta male. So he's not an alpha male. This is an alpha male right here, Aline. I really like to call it Aline, and I know that's wrong, but just look at it. Look at how it's spelled. Anyway, this is more like the alpha male. and Vincentina is more like the beta male. And then you've got the stereotypical quintessential feminine female. She likes, well, I'm not going to say she likes pink things, but, well, maybe she does. Maybe she likes pink things, but living in the third wave, maybe those pink things are guns or whatever. But 319 Leona is pretty tough, pretty standard feminine tactics. Will go out there and they'll say, now when you go in that forest, you better use the advice that I'm giving you instead of your own blind maleness. And that's how Leona works. But then you've got 89 Julia. This is the alpha feminine. This is that, power suit. I'm rising in the ranks. You can't talk your garbage to me, male. Julia does this. And so it says only among heavy declarers, someone who is the recipient of others' declared ways. And so, yeah, they're feminine, but they're going to do that feminine thing only among some of the more macho males. And if you're weak, they're not going to stand for that. So this is a tougher femininity than this femininity, and this is a weaker masculinity than this masculinity. I put number up here because as a polyamorous person, it actually matters to me. And it also, you have different levels of commitment, which are trained by society. And so most of us are trained to hook up with people and commit singly, standard till death do us part or whatever. Of course, that's the institution of marriage and all of the expectations that come with it are going to weigh differently depending on who you are. So some people really do commit to that one boyfriend or girlfriend. And if you want to look at public commitment, that is commitment in the eyes of everybody out there, then really the asteroid Juno shows how you do that. Stuff near Juno will show you how you appear to commit to other people. Since I have a lot of friends who actually don't do this, it's interesting to see Juno floating around alone in certain sections of the chart. A lot of my friends don't have a lot of stuff near Juno, and what that means is that as far as a commitment which is recognized as being a commitment in the eyes of the public, which is typically a monogamous one, no, it doesn't. There's not a lot in their charts that shows this. Instead, you'll often find people who commit to multiple groups of folks at once. They have to have those two friends that they go with if they're really into their freedom, whether they're male or female. They may cheat. They have two boyfriends, or they have a boyfriend, but then they have their friend's own friend. Yeah, Diotima indicates this kind of thing. It's one of the ones that's most closely associated with polyamory. Polyamory, again, is not to be confused with swinging. If you're looking at swinging, then you're going to have some of the horny asteroids in there, like Ninina. But Diotima by itself is nothing but bonding. The Uranian Zeus was interesting because if you have people who are not, they don't really care how many partners they have. They're just going to go out there and, if they feel like being monogamous, they'll be monogamous. If they feel like being polyamorous or single or whatever, then they'll just bond as they see fit. And this is totally like the Greek Zeus, right? Whenever Zeus wanted to get his rocks off, he would just go and do it. It didn't really matter whether it didn't even have to be a human or a god. He just goes and does whatever he wants with it, however many he wants. And this is basically what the open number of partners is. These people require more than one. These people don't care how many they end up with. And then you have people who are just single. The asteroid Rebekka is associated with being single. You want to bond, but you're like, I don't know. I don't know about that commitment thing. It's associated with people who choose to remain celibate for a while or permanently. And, celibacy is a thing. And if you want to know what it looks like in your chart, then one of your best bets is Rebekka. Now, there are tons and tons and tons of asteroids out there, but the ones I've listed are good indicators of where these things fall in your life. Now, I want to close by reading a couple of charts. Oh, wait a minute. Before I do that, let me tell you what to test these things against. So I've gone through all these asteroids on the previous slides, and oh, man, I always forget which way to roll this mouse wheel. I've gone through all these asteroids on the previous slides, and but you say, all right, I'm going to look them up in the chart. What am I looking for? Well, let me tell you that the top four things that you should look at are Venus, Mercury, Node, and the Midheaven. Let me just tell you why. Like, why are we not looking at the sun? If you recall, the sun is how you interact with people. It's just, it's not how you communicate with them. It's just how you come off. And to be honest, the sun is such a faker in some ways. I mean, if you have sun Lempo, for example, then that means you interact with people like a regular heterosexual person. Is that very informative? No, it isn't. And I found that in looking at charts, the sun is just not as important as how you willingly socialize with people, that is, Venus contacts, particularly among women, or how you make meaning of your relationships with people, and that is Mercury. It's equal between men and women as far as what it indicates. And then there is your destined projection. This is more or less, after you've read Venus and Mercury, this one is more or less how you're destined to identify in the end. Very, very fascinating to see which of the 20 bodies I've talked about are next to your node, because this is more or less how you're going to do power dynamics, whether or not you choose to change your official sexual or gender identity on the register. Node is what you're constantly pulled towards. And there are some people who never really feel comfortable in the relationships that they're in, even though, they're straight and they've got the standard biology and the standard biological identification, but somehow their relationships chronically don't work. And part of that is because you tend to be pulled to where whatever your node is saying. And then there's how people think you appear, how people just associate you. Look for those 20 guys on the midheaven. There are the fun four. After you've looked at these, and they can give you an idea of where somebody falls in terms of their identification, you can look at these. And these are great. These, Ninina is basically what lights you up. It's what turns you on. It's like a super version of Eros. It's, if you had to pick asteroids which were associated with being horny, Ninina, Eros, and Sarah would do it. S-A-R-A would do it. But Ninina is the strongest one of those. Then there's Nolli. Nolli is where people think you are right at home. People say, man, that individual is so comfortable with whatever. And if you read those 20 asteroids and any of them are next to Nolli, it means that people are going to view you as being comfortable in that position. Then there's 21 Lutetia, or Lutetia. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Let's just say it's Lutetia. This one is where you're comfortable in your own skin. You're just like, man, I'm myself. I like this. I like this human shell. If you've got any of those 20 characters next to Lutetia, then it's going to be easier to feel comfortable with your own physical body doing whatever that is. That's not just for the sex asteroids, but it's also just true in general. Surprisingly, Pallas is also another one. This is a very common asteroid, or minor planet, I should say. But Pallas, it shows where you're out for social justice. And this, I've found that people who are more forward in declaring their sexuality despite what they were trained will tend to have one of the 20 characters on Pallas, because they're basically going out into the world and saying, I'm female, goddammit. And Pallas actually turns out to be a kind of social statement of where you stand on these things. Now, after the fun four, the part of fortune is a little bit less. It's not really that major, but I did find that contacts to the part of fortune showed kind of where you were comfortable, but it could be you, it could be friends, we don't know. Then there are special indicators. Vertex and Saturn in particular. If you've got talk about awakening. Any of the 20 sex asteroids falling on your vertex has the ability to change your life. And so if you want to awaken something within yourself, look at the 20, look at whoever's next to vertex, go out there and prepare to have your life changed. This is, if you really want to make it easy to change how you view all this, contacts to the vertex between these sex asteroids is going to do it. And then there is Saturn. Saturn is a malefic. It shows what you like and what you don't like, and it's actually, let me take that back. I'm thinking of Jupiter right now. It shows what you are restricted by. So if, for example, you have McDonalda on Saturn, it means that either you experience restriction among people who are sexually extroverted, or you, in your sexual extroversion, restrict other people. Saturn is in top form here. Contacts to Saturn really tend to indicate stuff that just does not work for you as far as sexuality is concerned. If you have a certain kind of attitude or power bearing or biology that you just cannot get with, then it's likely going to be next to Saturn. So for me, example, I really have a hard time hanging out with males, with other males. I don't know if I'm just territorial like that or whatever. And lo and behold, my A-line is right next to Saturn. Other male company is a bother to me. So most of my friends are female. And then you've got Jupiter. Jupiter is your image. And your public image next to the 20 works a lot like Nolli. It's kind of like identification, but it's a watered down version of Nolli and Pallas. This is where you go out there and you say, yeah, my image is that of Georgia. I'm open to everybody. If you want to look at your friends and your power dynamic with your friends, you can look at some standard stuff. The Imum Coli, which is opposite the midheaven, right? It's the house 4 cusp. Bacchus, Uranus, and Armor all show the kind of power expression that you tend to hang out with. That's it for this one. In the next video, I didn't think it was going to be a next video, but this one's going long. So in the next video, I'll read a couple of sample charts and finish this up.